Hey everybody, it's your old pal Brian Hunt, and welcome to another episode of 60 Seconds of Risk. Now, as part of some of these episodes you've seen in the past, we've done some book reviews, and obviously the whole concept of this series is talking about risk in all its different facets and forms, not just insurance, but risk overall. And to that extent, I wanted to talk about a book that I've read recently that I found very intriguing and very interesting. And as you can see, I've got a nice bourbon here with me, and I gotta tell you, if you're gonna start reading this book, you're gonna need probably a couple of these to get through it. That is Megathreats by Dr. Nouriel Roubini. Now, for some of you who may not know, Dr. Roubini got the nickname of Dr. Doom because he was predicting the collapse of the housing crisis back in 2008 before it happened. And as a result, people called him Dr. Doom when he gave that presentation at the Davos presentation at the Economic Forum in Davos right before 2008. And people kind of laughed at him and criticized him for his conclusions, but he was pretty much spot on. And as a result, when he talks, people listen, and so do I. And so back in October of last year, he wrote this book, Megathreats, which is 10 dangerous trends that imperil our future and how to survive them. And having gone through this book, I gotta say, he's making a pretty convincing argument that the future could look pretty bleak. Now, like in any sort of situation, predictions, you don't know it's gonna come true until the future. And in the future, we're all going to be dead anyway, maybe. But here are some of the key things that Dr. Roubini talks about in his book, which should be people's concern or alarm. One is the mother of all debt crisis, as far as countries like the United States incurring a lot of debt. And when you have debt, it gets very hard to pay off that debt when the interest rates rise. Also, private and public failures. The demographic time bomb, which refers to countries are starting to having aging populations and also having less people, which is a major issue with respect to social security services or social services which require younger generation paying for the services of older generation. But when there are fewer people having kids, that means there's fewer workers to support all this aging population because we're getting older and living longer. He also talked about easy money trap with the boom bust cycle, which I think we're all starting to kind of feel the fact that everybody expected zero interest rates to go on forever, and as a result, they do go back up and need to go back. Hence, the senior manager at the Silicon Valley Bank kind of, screwed it up pretty bad as far as on behalf of themselves and their customers and their investors. The coming to great stagflation, which doesn't sound very fun. He also talks about currency meltdowns and financial instability, which kind of see a little bit. The end of globalization, which we're definitely starting to see some of the trends on that, especially since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and sort of the pullback from engagement with China, which has occurred as a result of not only from the COVID, but also just the conflict that's starting to percolate within the South China Sea and whether or not people feel confident they can depend upon, say, semiconductor chips coming out of Taiwan. The AI threat, which I think we're all starting to see with chatbot, how maybe AI might be taking your jobs in the future. The new Cold War, which I think we're definitely in the thrust of, as you can see, was going again in Ukraine and potentially in Taiwan. And then also an unhittable planet as far as global warming, the shifting in the climates and temperatures, and how you're starting to see increasing severity and frequency of events as far as flooding in the Midwest, hurricanes on the Gulf Coast, and how that's going to impact now and into the future as far as where people can actually live and sustainability, and as far as you talking about even shifting agriculture patterns. So, needless to say, he's got a lot in this book that's hard, you got to digest. It's a little bit scary. So again, you're going to probably need a nice stiff drink as you're reading this book. And whether or not all these things come true, I think he makes a very convincing argument that there are trends in the future that we need to prepare for. And like any sort of concept of risk or risk mitigation, don't just stick your head in the sand and think the problem's going to go away, which I think many people have been doing, kicking the can down the road. Some of these sort of chickens are coming back to roost, and as a result, we as a nation and we as a country have to figure out, and we as a planet have to figure out how we're going to deal with some of these issues. So again, like any sort of situation, knowing now allows you to provide information and to make plans for the future. But by kicking this under the carpet and not paying attention to it doesn't do you any good or your family in the future. So hopefully you found this enjoyable. Again, I think Dr. Roubini is pretty smart. He makes a very convincing argument in this book, and I definitely think it's worth your time. Like all things, if you've enjoyed this presentation, hopefully you liked it. If there's certain subjects or individuals you'd like to see on these posts, please let me know on LinkedIn. You can also subscribe to my channel on YouTube and find links to these videos on Twitter. Until next time, guys. See you later.